That was not the deep run that I was hoping for the Miami Hurricanes baseball team. So what went wrong?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers. I am Alex Donno, your host, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and also co-host of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen each and every day. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. While Miami did make a little bit of a run in the ACC Tournament to the semifinals, disappointing. The season came to an end Saturday night in that loss to Duke. Alex Donno alongside our baseball correspondent, Raymond Bourg. So, Ray, why did this team fall short of the expectations this year, in your humble opinion?
I think it's basically as we spoke about all year. Very young team, very young pitching staff. Didn't develop properly the way it should have. They had to rely on getting a lot of home runs and a lot of runs thanks to Danny. Other than that, they didn't do that. They lost the game. And the tournament was a perfect microcosm of the season. They hit a bunch of home runs against Louisville early. I think they got 3 runs in the first, and they never looked back. And they held together, even though their pitching started having some problems, but they had a big enough lead to cover it. And then the next game is with Clemson. They were pitching very well, and Gage had an incredible, 6, 7, 8 innings. And then it almost got blown in relief. Thank God for Eddie Guerrero. Outfielder catching that ball at the top of the ninth, thing jumping up. If it wasn't for that, game would have been tied. The pitching didn't develop the way I would have expected at all. I think that was the biggest problem all year. They just couldn't hold the lead. They couldn't keep a lead. The bats ever got cold, and it's usually like 2-3 runs. The pitching couldn't hold up. In fact, they didn't have an ERA below really 3. Gage had about 3.78 ERA or 3.87 ERA. Everyone else had at least a 5+. If you look at the statistic, it's amazing. It looks like you're playing Nintendo or whatever you want to call baseball with your pitchers getting racked. And that's what it felt like every game. It felt like they brought the old aluminum bats back.
Now, what would you say was the expectation? What was your expectation preseason as to how far this team would go? Regionals, super regionals, Omaha? Where did you think they would end up?
I thought it was going to be at least regionals. I knew it was going to be a young team. I knew JD was a new manager. I think that was a realistic expectation. The conference was loaded, more loaded than I think either one of us expected or anyone expected. They just was, it was top to bottom. It is the best conference. Them, 1A, SEC, whatever you want to think. But that's what my expectations were. I'm very disappointed. I knew we were having issues early against these better teams. Quick, and it didn't take long to realize this team's going to start struggling when we start playing against the good teams and not holding the lead. Specifically, the Clemson series was like, okay, we don't have the pitching this year, and are they going to be able to develop it? And it was hard for them because they played the best teams early in the schedule, early in the year. And they didn't play the weaker teams till later. The Pitts of the world, Notre Dame, even though they beat us, they were a weaker team. They didn't even qualify for the ACC baseball tournament. I knew we were in trouble. But it was a very disappointing season. I think there also was a lot of injuries that JD didn't share. One player that kind of disappeared was Blake Sear. He was hurt, but I never really read or heard anything about what was wrong with him or how if he was out for the year or any other injuries. But JD made that comment. No one knows what we went through this year. But I'm like, how about tell us? That would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess he just wanted to respect the privacy. Maybe Shear will come out and say what it was about. But I want to get into a positive before we get back into what happens next. You mentioned Daniel Cuvet, who had incredible season. He broke a 28-year-old Miami Hurricanes freshman home run record. Pat Burrell was the guy who had that old record. Danny Dingers hits 24 dingers this year. Raymond, that was a bright spot in, an otherwise Jekyll and Hyde season.
Yeah, absolutely. He was outstanding. He easily was the team MVP and carried this team as far as it did and almost carried him to the ACC title, or at least to the title game. So he was an incredible pickup this past year. Hopefully he's going to be around next year, but was the heart and soul of this team. He went his way, the team went, bottom line. Did a great job hitting, great swing, great player, a great captain of that team as far as I'm concerned. It's going to be an exciting couple more years, or however long he stays at the U.
So, all right, what happens next in terms of the staff? Because I don't know how much of this do you put on JD Arteaga? Obviously, a lot of people thought it was a lazy hire, right? An internal hire after, things didn't work out with Gino DeMare. How much of this was on JD versus what he inherited? And do you think there could be changes to his staff heading into next year?
Well, he came into a very young team. He recruited, there was at least, 8 to 15 freshmen, it seemed like, and I'm not sure maybe he even redshirted, but definitely I didn't see the pitching develop as I like to. This Kaba, who actually came around, the true freshman, he actually had about 6 or 7 closes, and I see some great potential out of him. But the question being is this, I see the issue being the coach, and not the pitching coach, not necessarily JD. JD was played very aggressively. He looked like he could manage. I mean, he got through the ACC tournament to the semifinals, so it wasn't just luck. But the pitching coach, I think, is going to be a concern. Whether it's him, I mean, he's the next guy from the Red Sox. I think it doesn't translate well because you never see. I'll give you an example, and I may have said this the last podcast was all the famous Miami managers in baseball, great college baseball. You never see them go into the MLB. You never see them go to AAA or Major League. They stay over there. It's a different game. It's a developmental game. But they may need to make a change of pitching coach, and he may end up going back to the Red Sox, realize this is not working out. It also depends on the AD. He will make changes because he's done that before. He's forced assistants to be changed. He's done it at Clemson. He may do it at Miami. But there's a big concern on multiple facets. The transfer portal. I don't know how it works for baseball, and I'm not going to claim to. How many of these guys are going to take off? Will Danny leave for a better program to win a title? Will he go to a Wake Forest? Would he go to an SEC school? Who's going to be coming in? That was a major complaint I read about somebody. Florida State brought in I think 90% of their team was transfers this year from Florida State. And they won. Wow. And that was amazing. And can he bring them in? Can he recruit the kids? As far as the players being recruited, I've looked at a couple names, but there's nothing really definite because it just deals with the draft, which unfortunately is going to be till the All-Star game, which I've heard the agents hate. And I think a lot of baseball players hate because they have to wait to make a decision until July. The draft really causes problems. So who's going to come back? Who's going to stay? Who's going to transfer? We won't know more of that till late July, till right after the draft. But my concern is a lot of these players and the young ones could take off, but they're going to have to make some sort of changes or some sort of commitment to keep these players on board, just like football.
So the college baseball postseason moves on without Miami. Miami's season is done. Who do you think wins it all? Who do you think wins that College World Series in Omaha?
Clearly favors Tennessee. They're one of the favorites. Also at A&M. Kentucky's also very good. You were starting a rhythm again at SEC. There's a lot of complaints about we had too many SEC teams. Well, get used to it. Wait till you see the 12-team football playoff. This is the foreshadowing of what that is going to be. Some sleepers potentially could be UGA. They've played really well. They've got supposedly now the first pick of the draft. I don't have his name in front of me, but they're a very good team. And let's go back to an old enemy, Gators. They barely got in. They were one game above 500. They snuck in, but that team is still loaded. But the SEC may have been the best conference next to the ACC, however you want to flip that coin. That could be a surprise dark horse as well, too. And Duke really got themselves hurt. They were trying to get the home field advantage. So when they burned, I'm afraid they burned their pitchers out. So congratulations, you get to go to Oklahoma, and you get to play the Sooners. Good luck getting out of that. They have the talent to do it, but Oklahoma's loaded. They're another good program with a historical record of wonderful pitching.
Last thought I want to get from you, because I know you're a big follower of realignment rumors for college sports. Do you have any thought on now the buzz that Utah could be interested in joining the ACC? Because I wouldn't mind bringing in the Utes. If we're bringing in Cal and Stanford, you might as well bring in a way better program in Utah.
Yeah, absolutely. Did listen to your show on the ACC, Locked On ACC. Something that y'all had missed in a comment about them, Utah, well, they haven't joined the Big 12 yet. Let's go back in history. When the Big East exploded, when basically Louisville and Pittsburgh left, TCU was supposed to go in the Big East. That was the plan. They realized what happened. The Big 12 also realigned. TCU paid, I think, $5 million to get out of the Big East right before they were supposed to start. So I think that could, I don't know if that could potentially with Utah, but there is a precedent and it could happen. And it may be a small fine gap, but it'd be a bigger fit for Utah to get into the Big 12 because you are seeing Oregon State and Wazoo lose all their great players. Thankfully, they're coming to Miami. And I think that's they see that they're seeing a hammering on the wall that the Big 12 is not going to work at all for them. They're going to need to get into a better conference to keep their players and keep recruiting because Utah is a hell of a team. They just happen to have the snafu now and then of losing to the Ducks, losing to the Beavers, losing to UW or USC. But they've also won Big 12 championships. I'm sorry, Pac-12 championship, which is now
Pac-12,
gone. Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8, which is now gone. Like Bill Walden is, God rest him, God rest his soul.
Yeah, God rest his soul.
I think it could be realistic, but I think like the realignment will happen by the end of summer. I don't know what the court kids are going to do, but it's a great fit if they can find a way to get out of their Big 12 contract. I'm more excited about them than Cal Berkeley.
Same here. I agree with that, and hopefully Hurricanes baseball can find more stability next season. He is Raymond Bourg. You know him as Georgia Cane fan, GA Cane fan. I am Alex Donno. We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.